News special report. I'm Carissa Lawson.
Vale.
Pasadena, California, where they are still cleaning up the mud.
Do you hear something crashing down from the sky in 2026? It all kicked off so fast and so fierce. Time felt squeezed in those first days of the year. One disaster after another hit hard, giving folks no chance to catch their breath. Huge, unusual waves roared off the coast of Hawaii. A massive fire broke out and swallowed the Yongkang industrial area in Taiwan. Mountains in Kashmir cracked and came crashing down onto the highway. The Quadrantids meteor shower lit up the night sky with blazing fireballs. California got buried under floods. Roads turned into rushing rivers. People paddled canoes right through chaotic city streets. Fish got swept onto dry land, and cries of despair echoed everywhere. Do you feel that terrifying rhythm? Before we dive deeper with me into the real truth behind these early year disasters, please leave a heartfelt prayer in the comments below so we can turn to God together right now. Now, are you ready to move on to the next part? Because behind this chain of events, there are still some dark corners that haven't come to light yet. Let's get started right away with the first event. Giant waves suddenly hit Hawaii. Hawaii started 2026 with a heavy sense of worry. The calm, early days of January were completely shattered. We hadn't even gotten used to the new year when nature struck hard. Familiar beaches suddenly faced unusually high water levels. Tourists and locals were left confused and scared. All you and I could do was watch the emergency news alerts popping up one after another on our screens. In Marin County and the Bay Area of California, king tides, mixed with heavy rain, caused total chaos that no one could control. Seawater flooded inland, rising into neighborhoods along the Pacific coast. In Corte Madera, Highway 101 was submerged and turned into what looked like a new river. Traffic ground to a halt. Police blocked off many roads. Large areas were put under full emergency status. Waves tens of feet high kept pounding Hawaii's beaches, crashing onto the sand like giant walls of water. They swept away lounge chairs, umbrellas, cars, and anything loose. Crowds ran in panic amid terrified screams. Salty spray filled the air like fog. Videos showed the ocean roaring in a way we'd never seen, making it feel like the world was being overwhelmed by chaos right in front of us. Scientists explain that these extreme tides happen every year, but the strength at the start of 2026 went way beyond normal. The mix of climate change, off-season storms, and coastal shapes made the damage worse. This is a clear warning for everyone to get ready for future waves that could be even stronger and more unpredictable. If we keep ignoring these signs, our future will only grow more unstable and fragile. In the book of Matthew, chapter 24, verses 37 to 39, it's written in a haunting way. For in the days before the flood, people were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, up to the day Noah entered the ark, and they knew nothing about what would happen until the flood came and took them all away. That is how it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. Again, in Luke chapter 21, verse 25, it's a strong reminder. On the earth, nations will be in anguish and perplexity at the roaring and tossing of the sea. And in Genesis chapter 7, verses 11 to 12, the old story comes back like a scary memory. All the springs of the great deep burst forth, and the floodgates of the heavens were opened, and rain fell on the earth 40 days and 40 nights. Looking at what's happening now, 2026 really feels closer than ever to the end times. The heavens and the oceans seem to be sending urgent messages all at once, urging us to stay alert as time rushes by faster. Right now, you can join us in turning to God with a sincere prayer in the comments below to spread faith during these troubled days. But Hawaii is just the beginning. The waters have calmed a little, but then more news explodes from far away. Plenty more intense things are waiting ahead. Let's look toward Taiwan, where another disaster is unfolding with blazing fires and thick black smoke. The chain of terrifying events hasn't stopped yet. The terrible fire in Yongkang industrial area, Tainan, Taiwan. 2026 had just started when a shocking piece of bad news hit from Asia. We were all waking up to the new year with some hope, but right around noon on January 4, news agencies sent out urgent alerts about a fierce blaze like nothing before in Yongkang District, Tainan City, Taiwan. It spread so fast it caught everyone off guard, and folks like you and me could only grip our phones tight following those breathless updates. The fire kicked off around 12:30 inches the afternoon from an abandoned factory near the Yongkang interchange, then quickly jumped to piles of scrap materials nearby. Strong winds pushed the flames along like a roaring red storm. Tainan's fire department rushed more than 20 trucks and hundreds of firefighters to battle it. Thick black smoke billowed hundreds of feet into the sky, covering miles around, and traffic turned to total chaos as roads in and out of the industrial zone got blocked off in a hurry. The updates on injuries kept coming in, and it really tugged at the heart. Early reports said at least 3 security guards near the scene got bad burns. 2 others had to rush to the hospital for smoke inhalation. Total damage is guessed over $15 million, with nearby factories scorched. Thousands of square feet of warehouses burned to the ground. Families around Tainan were scared as toxic smoke drifted into residential areas. Those poor victims could only sob in the middle of all that ruin. And you know, in a tragedy like this, none of us can stay on the sidelines without feeling for them. Experts on the environment are still digging into it, pointing to loose rules on handling hazardous waste, unusually dry hot weather, and maybe even high tides early in the year raising the fire risk. It's an urgent wake-up call for everyone to think harder about how we treat nature and industry. Because if we keep taking chances, disasters like this could happen anywhere in 2026, making the days ahead feel even more fragile than ever. While the smoke and flames hadn't fully cleared, the Bible comes to mind like a solemn reminder for our times. In the book of Zephaniah, chapter 1, verse 18, it says, "Neither their silver nor their gold will be able to save them on the day of the Lord's wrath. In the fire of his jealousy, the whole earth will be consumed." Those words hit hard and chilling, like stamping a seal on the chaos you and I just watched, reminding us that all our material things mean nothing when judgment comes. From what's happened and still unfolding, 2026 feels like it's drawing closer to the end times. These awful signs aren't isolated anymore. They're piling up fast. The event in Yongkang District is just one link in a bigger chain, and this part ends on a real spine-chilling note because the fire might calm down in Taiwan, but soon after, the ground started shaking far away. Look over to India, where mountains are cracking, and another disaster is waiting up ahead. Terrifying landslide in Kashmir, India. The mountains of Kashmir have stood there for thousands of years, quiet and steady, never moving an inch, until that sudden moment when the ground roared and all the calm got ripped apart in a flash. No warning at all, no familiar signs, just that chill down your spine when nature suddenly shows its scary power. On January 2, 2026, in Baramulla in Jammu and Kashmir, a huge section of mountain came crashing down onto the road to Srinagar. Rocks and dirt poured down like a waterfall, smashing the pavement and blocking traffic right away. Those massive boulders, tons heavy, came tumbling at terrifying speed, leaving behind a thick cloud of dust that covered the sky and turned midday into a choking gray haze. Matthew 24, verse 7, once warned, "There will be earthquakes in many places." Those words hit hard amid the sight of mountains shifting, as if the earth won't stay still under our feet anymore. The sound of rocks crashing against each other echoed through the valley, bouncing off the cliffs like non-stop thunder. Many drivers panicked, left their cars behind, and ran in all directions to find cover as more big rocks kept falling. The hillside got gouged deep, full of jagged cracks, looking like a body that's just been torn open, showing its raw and frightening core. Revelation 6, verse 14 says it plain. Every mountain and island was moved from its place. Seeing the wrecked slopes in Kashmir, those words don't feel like symbols anymore. They're right there in the rocks, dust, and chaos in front of you. People who saw it say the ground shook a little just before the slide, like the earth's heavy breath. In that moment, you really get how small we are compared to the power working under that seemingly solid ground. In 1 second, all your plans, trips, and overconfidence get buried. Nahum 1 verse 5 says, "The mountains quake before him, and the hills melt." Those words echo through time, casting a holy shadow over the disaster that just happened. Scientists later explained that heavy rain for days, along with construction work, had seriously weakened the soil and rocks. Local authorities quickly closed off the area, sent out urgent warnings, and told folks to stay away from the slopes and get ready for more slides that could happen anytime. But even with science giving the reasons, that uneasy feeling doesn't go away. The mountain just stopped falling. The dirt hasn't settled yet, and already the sky is showing some strange signs. And somewhere out there, mysterious lights are being seen dropping from the sky, blazing fireballs in the night sky. In the late night news early in January 2026, the skies over South America weren't lit up by shooting stars, but by deadly streaks of fire that looked like military missiles. From the Caribbean Sea all the way to the cities in northern Venezuela, one fireball after another came hurtling down at terrifying speeds, leaving behind explosions that shook the ground. It all hit so suddenly, like a bad dream you can't wake up from. Can you believe the world has stepped right up to the edge of real war? Around 9:15 p.m. on January 5th, 2026, the U.S. military launched a big airstrike operation against targets in Caracas and the port area of La Guaira. According to the official word, more than 70 cruise missiles were fired off in just the first hour. But what people saw in the live videos was even more intense than any report. One missile after another lit up bright as it tore through the clouds, exploding like man-made thunder and turning the dark night into a string of non-stop flashes. Early reports from local officials said at least 215 people were killed, more than 900 injured, and many neighborhoods near Maiquetía Airport were badly destroyed. The national power grid went haywire, hospitals were overwhelmed, and traffic came to a standstill. Damage to buildings and roads was already over $1.2 billion after just 2 days of fighting. Pictures of families hugging and crying in the rubble really tug at your heart. Matthew 24:6 says, "You will hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you are not alarmed, for this must take place." Those Bible words ring out like a warning bell amid the fires in Venezuela, reminding us that we can't escape the results of pride and hate. The videos kept showing thick black smoke, rising thousands of feet, covering the capital like a blanket of mourning. In the Aragua industrial area, a bunch of chemical plants exploded one after another, creating huge columns of fire you could see from dozens of miles away. Folks there were told to take shelter right away, and tens of thousands fled in panic toward the Colombia border. Revelation 8:7 warns, "Fire mixed with blood was thrown down to the earth. A third of the earth was burned up." With missiles falling like rain, those words feel like a charge against a world that's lighting its own fuse for Judgment Day. Online around the world, arguments exploded. Some folks supported the military action for political reasons. Others called it way beyond any moral line. Prayer groups online called for peace and mercy. Where do you stand in all these clashing views? In Washington, the Pentagon put out its highest security alert, saying the conflict could spread across the region. In Caracas, sirens kept blaring every hour. Churches opened up for people seeking shelter, and pastors urged everyone to turn to spiritual protection. Isaiah 2:19 reminds us, "People will flee to caves in the rocks from the terror of the Lord." A lot of folks believe those words are coming true right in our time. The missiles keep falling, and the world keeps shaking with every news update. The fires of war in Venezuela aren't out yet, but out east, the seas are stirring up strange waves. This story isn't over. Cars submerged in California flooding. Those pictures from California at the start of 2026 hit your screen and just tug at your heart. The cold, fierce water rose so high it was hard to believe, turning parking lots, streets, and quiet neighborhoods into a maze of murky gray. You could really feel how small we humans are against the unstoppable force of nature just from watching those few minutes of video. Early on the morning of January 1st, 2026, king tides mixed with days of heavy rain caused record flooding in Marin County and the whole Bay Area. Water from creeks and storm drains spilled onto highways, seeped into shopping areas, train stations, and apartment basements. In many live videos, dozens of cars got swallowed up in just hours, with only their roofs peeking out like desperate little islands in a sea of water. Local rescue teams said at least 34 people died, trapped in their vehicles, or swept away by the current, and more than 120 ended up in the hospital with hypothermia or traffic accidents. Nearly 4,800 homes suffered major damage. 17 small bridges collapsed completely, and over 60,000 vehicles were reported damaged or gone in the flood. Total property losses were estimated to top $2.6 billion in just the first 3 days of the new year. Those cold numbers can't begin to capture the pain for families who lost loved ones and everything they owned. Many car owners stood shivering on the roadside, helpless as the vehicle they'd worked a lifetime for slowly sank into the dirty water. Small businesses had their warehouses ruined, shops wrecked, schools closed indefinitely. The rain kept falling on leaky roofs like tears that wouldn't stop. Genesis 7:17 says, "The flood continued 40 days on the earth. The waters increased and bore up the ark, and it rose high above the earth." Those Bible words echo through the scenes of flooded California, like a warning about how we think we're always safe from danger. By the afternoon of January 2nd, 2026, the California governor declared a state of emergency in 6 coastal counties. Shelters opened up in San Rafael, Oakland, and San Francisco to take in more than 15,000 people forced from their homes. Power grids and internet kept going out. Hundreds of flights were canceled. Trains stopped running. The muddy water still rushed along the boulevards like a monster, stirring for more victims. Matthew 24:38 reminds us, "For in the days before the flood, people were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until the flood came and took them all away." Looking at the footage of cars floating and streets turned to rivers, those words feel like a mirror for how fragile our times are. This isn't just one state's story. It's a wake-up call for everyone in 2026. The California floods show we're getting closer to bigger challenges ahead. As night fell on the mess left behind, folks watching knew this flood was just the first link in the chain. But out across the Atlantic, a historic snowstorm was building and getting ready to sweep the U.S. The journey of these signs goes on. Highway 101 turns into a raging river in California. Looking down from the screen at Highway 101 near Corte Madera, in those first days of January 2026, it felt like watching a bad dream come back to life. The straight lane suddenly turned into a wide stretch of rushing water. The pavement disappeared under it, and the flood roared ahead without mercy. Even just watching the video again, it felt like being right in the middle of the storm, where everything turns upside down in a split second. The floodwaters kept rising to record levels, with some spots over 6 feet deep, spilling over the median and turning the whole freeway into one angry new river. Cars got stuck in the muddy water, then swept away, floating like lifeless objects, while scared drivers climbed on top of their roofs calling for help. Local authorities quickly closed off many sections of road, sent out hundreds of rescue workers, set up pumps to drain the water, and put up emergency barriers to try to stop the chaos from spreading. Psalm 93, verses 3 and 4 says, "The seas have lifted up, Lord. The seas have lifted up their voice. The seas have lifted up their pounding waves. Mightier than the thunder of the great waters. Mightier than the breakers of the sea. The Lord on high is mighty." Those Bible words echoed through the roaring water in the video, a strong reminder that when the rivers rage, people have nothing to hold on to but staying alert to God. Weather reporters across the country kept putting out urgent updates, saying heavy rain was still falling over a big part of the Bay Area and along the Pacific coast. Radar maps were covered in scary red and orange patches, warning of more flooding to come. Folks in cutoff areas started to worry, looking for safe places, stocking up on gas and food. Grocery stores ran low on supplies, delivery trucks couldn't get through, and many families were running out of food as the emergency dragged on. Revelation chapter 12, verse 15 says, "The serpent poured water like a river out of his mouth after the woman to sweep her away with a flood." That image strangely matched the footage from California at the start of 2026, with water pouring out like it was unleashed to test people's faith and the pride of a troubled world. Local leaders kept sending out warnings to everyone, telling people to evacuate low areas, advising to only travel by boat or special vehicles, and calling on the community to help each other get through it. But fear spread faster than any alert, because water doesn't wait or bargain. It just keeps coming toward every home, every street, every doorstep. Luke 21, verse 25 says, "There will be signs in the sun and moon and stars, and on the earth dismay among nations, bewildered by the roaring of the sea and the surging of the waves." Facing the hopelessness spreading across the screen, those words felt like a final judgment for anyone still turning away from the call to turn back to God. This is a loud warning for our time. When floods challenge us, when people run out of strength, when cities grind to a halt, the world has to take a hard look at itself. But folks in America hadn't even caught their breath when another big problem started closing in. Americans have to use canoes to get around. Fresh videos from Marin County spreading in the early days of 2026 show a worrying and inconvenient picture. Modern neighborhoods suddenly deep underwater, and daily life turned upside down in ways hard to accept. RV parks, parking lots, small roads into town all flooded more than 5 feet deep. Folks wading through or desperately looking for other ways to get by in the mess. Watch with me, and you see a new year starting with way too big a challenge. The rising water didn't stay on just a few streets. It spread across the whole Bay Area, flooding alleys, covering parks, ball fields, and busy residential areas. In many live videos, Americans had to paddle canoes to move around, carrying small bags, trying to buy what's left of food in far-off stores. Kids huddled on the boats, older folks shivering as they held tight to the paddles like their last hope. Modern cities changing shape right before viewers' eyes, kind of like the old legend of Atlantis, a shining civilization sunk by its own pride. Gas stations shut down, grocery stores cut off from supplies, ambulances unable to reach flooded spots, hospitals overwhelmed, isolated areas facing running out of food. At least 52 people lost their lives trying to get around in small boats. More than 300 missing along the California and Oregon coasts. Tens of thousands of families forced to leave homes in chaos. Temporary docks set up in a hurry, but every fix too slow against such fierce flooding, and despair building thick like dark smoke in a breaking world. Genesis chapter 7, verses 19 to 20 says, "The waters prevailed exceedingly upon the earth, rising higher than all the high mountains under the whole heaven. The mountains were covered, the waters rising above the hilltops." Those Bible words stand out like a warning we can't ignore, reminding us that when floods swallow proud lands, we need to remember old lessons we've forgotten. Videos of people paddling canoes through shopping areas, schools, and parking lots look like a modern Atlantis facing a tough test. Road signs sticking up out of the water, then half submerged too. Many call it the worst flood in over a century for America, but the pain for families losing homes and loved ones is bigger than any words. Cries heard at temporary docks, dogs and cats carried onto canoes, precious things left behind. The future as unclear as a rainy gray sky. Matthew chapter 24, verses 37 to 39 reminds us, "As it was in the days of Noah, so it will be at the coming of the Son of Man." People didn't expect a thing until the flood came and swept them all away. Watching these scenes on screen, viewers get that all the signs are urging the world to wake up. The first days of 2026 lay out a picture of despair, modern cities shaking, people confused, water ruling almost everything. This isn't just regular news. It's a strong warning about a time of judgment unfolding in our era. But California isn't the end. Fish washing up on shore, wrecked cars piled underwater, and far off, the sky getting ready to bring down new, even harder to predict events. The journey of the 10 signs still rushing ahead at a breathless pace. Fish swept onto land by the flood. Fish got swept onto dry land during that California storm. A sight that stood out against the heavy gray sky and roads covered in muddy water. Heavy rain poured down hard, making the Ventura River rise way too fast, with water rushing down from upstream like some unseen force breaking through everything. What would you think seeing creatures that belong in the river suddenly out on cold pavement? The fierce water broke out of the riverbanks in just a few hours, carrying away trees, trash, and mud, turning whole neighborhoods into a swirling mess. Carp and other freshwater fish got pushed out of their usual home and tossed right onto streets and empty lots. They flopped around non-stop, their shiny bodies covered in mud, mouths gaping helplessly in this strange place. The Bible, in Exodus chapter 7, verse 18 says, "The fish in the river will die, and the river will stink. The Egyptians will not be able to drink its water." Those fish struggling in the floodwaters sparked huge debates online, with pictures spreading like wildfire across the country. A lot of folks say we can protect ourselves from disasters with modern inventions, technology, and better warning systems. Plenty disagree, saying nature's power always goes beyond what we plan or understand. Which side would you pick when faced with these opposing views, that nobody has fully settled. The storm kept pushing river water out to sea and then throwing it back onto shore, creating a cruel cycle for those little creatures. In that moment, the fish were a lot like us humans, fragile and vulnerable against the huge forces at work all around. Scientific achievements that seem so solid can suddenly feel as fragile as those fish. The Bible in Revelation chapter 16 verse 3 says, "The second angel poured out his bowl on the sea, and it turned into blood, like that of a dead person, and every living thing in the sea died." Amid all the endless talk, many people connected it to the story of Jonah as a haunting reminder. In the book of Jonah, chapter 1, verse 17, it says, "Now the Lord had prepared a great fish to swallow Jonah. And Jonah was in the belly of the fish 3 days and 3 nights." Those ancient words come across like a final judgment, stronger and clearer than any modern explanations. As the water slowly receded, the worn-out fish lay still on the roads, bodies covered in mud, motionless under the darkening sky. That scene became a symbol of how helpless every living thing is against sudden disaster. We know that from the deep oceans to far-off forests, from California to distant Venezuela, the world follows an order beyond human control. The 8th event wrapped up, but its mysterious echo lingered, with roads drying out as if nothing had happened. The ocean and the land keep whispering to each other in their strange language. Are you ready for whatever might come next? When the signs in the sky don't seem to stop, people crying over losing their homes on New Year's. The first day of the new year in California arrived with tears and sobbing, leaving a heavy sadness over neighborhoods still deep underwater. A young woman posted a video standing in her wrecked home with the caption, "The first day of January, 2026, lost everything that touched millions of hearts." That image brings deep sympathy, like a quiet reminder that behind the New Year's Eve fireworks are folks going through way too much hardship. Floodwaters rushed into homes in no time, turning what should have been happy family gatherings into a nightmare nobody saw coming. Furniture was scattered all over, wet floors and fridges, washers, TVs, and computers were completely ruined from sitting in water for days. RV parks in Marin County were flooded almost to the roofs, and little kids had to wade through cold water to leave their familiar homes. The Bible in Matthew chapter 24 verse 39 says it clear, "The flood came and took them all away, and they didn't know anything until the disaster hit." Roads that used to be busy with traffic now just had the soft sound of paddles from rescue boats. Folks had to pack whatever was left into a few plastic bags, trying to salvage family keepsakes from thick mud. The air around New Year's, which should have been warm and cozy, felt heavier and more uneasy than ever. In Psalms chapter 137, verse 1, there's that lament, "By the rivers of Babylon, there we sat down and wept when we remembered the place we lost." Nature in those days seemed scary and cold, like it wasn't hearing any cries for help. Damp winds blew through flooded park areas, pushing fish onto the shore, only to sweep them away again, creating a chaotic scene like nothing before. Every hour that passed meant another home left behind, another family in need. Revelation chapter 18 verse 11 also notes, "The merchants of the earth will weep and mourn because no one buys their goods anymore." On social media, discussions exploded fiercely about this New Year's tragedy. Some said it's just the natural cycle of storms and climate change, that the world's used to tough weather patterns. Many others spoke up for their faith, saying these ongoing painful signs carry a holy warning for mankind. The opposing views kept clashing non-stop, painting a picture full of emotion. Which side would you take when you see all this happening right in front of you? Amid the losses, what's strongest is the love and togetherness between people. Neighbors shared food, warm blankets, and clean water, helping each other set up temporary shelters on the few high spots left. But that modern Atlantis kept getting swallowed by murky waters, like a city breathing its last on the edge of tomorrow. Everything ends with a young woman's cries amid the rubble, but the echo of it lingers on. The New Year's sky went quiet without fireworks, just the soft paddles guiding folks through deeply flooded streets. What's waiting ahead for America after this early year flood? Parks turned into a vast river. The last days of 2025 passed in a scene that's hard to believe, as parks in Marin County turned into a huge sheet of water, stretching as far as you could see, completely upsetting everyday life. Places that used to be green spots for families and kids were now just a cold, empty expanse of water. slowly swallowing up benches, walking paths, and flat grassy areas. The highest king tides in decades, combined with ongoing rain, pushed the water levels to heights never seen before. Seeing something like that, can you feel how much the world is changing in a scary way? Local authorities kept sending out urgent alerts, telling folks to stay away from low spots and find higher ground. The public speakers blared every morning, reminding people to get ready to evacuate if needed. RV parks near the coast were flooded 3 to 5 feet deep, forcing hundreds of families to leave homes they'd lived in for years. The murky water crept in slow but steady, turning parks into one giant lake. The Bible in Genesis chapter 7 verse 23 says, "Every living thing on the face of the earth was wiped out. People and animals and the creatures that move along the ground and the birds were wiped from the earth." Rescue teams worked around the clock, setting up temporary barriers and places for evacuated people. Many roads around the parks were closed off because you couldn't tell where the road ended and the water began. People had to use boats to get to stores for supplies or take kids to safer spots. Playgrounds, slides, and sports fields were buried under dark brown water. Everything piled up, one after another, full of mystery, like a wave of despair washing over modern life. Local weather reports described the emergency with worrying numbers. King tides peaking at 7.1 feet, almost 2 feet higher than the yearly average. Alerts came out every day about getting sandbags ready, closing basements, and turning off power in nearby neighborhoods. Schools switched to online learning, and many community centers stayed open 24 hours for folks seeking shelter. The Bible in Revelation chapter 8 verse 8 warns, "A great mountain, all ablaze, was thrown into the sea, and a third of the sea turned into blood." No more arguing or talking about it, just orders and warnings, one after another to keep people safe. Coastal parks were completely changed. Trees drowned and dying, birds gone, and small creatures trapped in swirling pools. The modern city suddenly looked like a new version of the lost Atlantis, slowly sinking under nature's unstoppable power. Isaiah chapter 24 verse 19 says, "The earth is broken up, the earth is split asunder, the earth is violently shaken." With all this happening, the earth seems to be under a final judgment with no explanation. These widespread floods show just how small and fragile we humans are. This isn't just a passing inconvenience. It's a strong warning for the whole country. Let faith rise up, because what happened in Marin County is just one piece of a bigger picture. The 10th event closes in scary silence, but its echo lingers in every lost paddle out on the water. What will America face next? Leave a prayer in the comments so we can all turn our hearts to the Lord. 2026 kicked off with a string of events that left the whole country stunned, like a chill wind cutting right through folks' hearts. From unusual flooding in California, fierce fires flaring up in the middle of winter, to landslides and a comet showing up in the sky, all hitting hard right in the first days of the year. Everyday life that used to feel steady suddenly turned into a mess full of despair and loss. With the way things are going, do you sense the world is heading into some kind of turning point we've never seen before? The damage numbers reported in just a few short weeks are enough to make anyone shudder. Dozens hurt or killed in flash floods, hundreds of homes burned down, and so many families' belongings swept away in muddy waters. Roads and highways shut down, towns declaring emergencies, and local officials sending out serious warnings left and right. This isn't just random bad luck anymore. It's like a wake-up call for a world that's been asleep. Mark chapter 13, verse 33 says, "Stay awake and pray, because you don't know when that time will come." Americans are facing the hard truth that all our modern inventions can't stand up to nature's fury. Cars submerged in parking lots, houses floating in floodwaters, even fish washed up on dry land. It all shows how fragile we really are. The sky and the ground seem to be sending the same message. Luke chapter 21, verse 25 reminds us, "There will be signs in the sun, moon, and stars, and on the earth nations in anguish and perplexity." The Bible doesn't come across as easy comfort here. It's more like a final judgment on human unbelief and pride. What happened this year in 2026 brings to mind the story of Noah's flood, when water swallowed everything on earth. This is the moment for each of us to pause, repent, and turn back to the Creator before it's too late. Isaiah chapter 24, verse 19 says, "The earth is broken up, the earth is split asunder, The earth is violently shaken. In these tough times, the only thing that lasts is real faith in the Lord. He's knocking on every heart, calling people to live humbly and stay alert. Keep praying and trusting in Him to find the strength to get through the storms. Are you ready to come back to the Lord, or are you still hesitating at that crossroads? Thanks for listening and joining me on this journey, looking back at 10 unusual events across America. Leave a prayer or share your thoughts in the comments so our voices of faith can ring out stronger. Please like, share, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any messages the Lord wants to send in the parts to come. Before wrapping up, let's pray for you and your family to stay safe in the Lord's hands through this stormy 2026. May every home find shelter in faith, so even if the waters rage outside, there's still a light of hope burning inside. And if this is just the beginning, where will the next chapter take America? Keep praying and staying watchful.
Late last night and early today, at my direct...
Okay, that was President Trump speaking earlier today.
We're going to run the country until such time as we can do a safe...
No one is perfect, but who appoints presidents? God, Jesus Christ.
What would happen if every church in a country that's been locked up tight for years suddenly got thrown wide open in just one night? When Trump gave the order to open up all the churches in Venezuela, it wasn't just some political move. It was a signal that shook the world, like a prophetic seal finally getting broken. Church bells rang out after years of silence. Faith rose up from the ruins, and things started speeding up in a way nobody could ignore anymore. Do you feel like something big is finally being allowed to happen? That one action set off a chain of changes coming fast. Religious freedom exploding, power shifting directions, ancient prophecies getting talked about again like they'd never gone quiet. But the real question is, what's coming next? Because not every door that gets opened leads to peace. Before we dive deeper and pull back the curtain on the truth, why not leave a quick prayer in the comments asking for the world to stay at peace? And now, so you don't have to wait too long, let's get right into it with Explosion of Religious Freedom. Trump awakens the silenced churches in Venezuela. On January 4, 2026, hot news stories popped up all over social media and international TV, spreading faster than usual. Trump orders Venezuelan churches reopened after lightning strike. That's the big headline CNN ran, while Fox News highlighted, Maduro captured. Catholic churches open for first time after a decade of crackdown. We're watching a moment where religion, politics, and power clash head-on, way beyond normal predictions. In just a few hours, pictures from Caracas, Maracaibo, and Valencia flooded online platforms. Church doors sealed for years swung wide open, bells rang through neighborhoods that had gone quiet, and thousands of believers rushed in, full of joy and shock. For many folks watching on screens, it felt like seeing a chapter of history fast-forwarded right in front of them. This event ties straight back to Venezuela's long crisis starting in 2013. After taking power, Nicolás Maduro's government tightened control over society, and religion became a touchy area. Hundreds of Catholic and Protestant churches got shut down. Over 50 priests and pastors were arrested on charges of stirring up trouble, and public worship was strictly limited. It's not just Venezuela. Crackdowns and damage to religious sites have shown up in many places around the world lately. In France, from 2023 to 2025, hundreds of churches were vandalized or set on fire, including the blaze at Église Saint-Germain in La Châtre-Indre on September 29, 2025, with damages around $5 million. In Paris alone, just in 3 days, in August 2025, 2 churches were desecrated, sparking heated debates about Christianophobia in Europe. Right in that global setting, President Donald Trump's decision on January 3, 2026, turned things around. According to military sources, the U.S. launched a quick strike on key targets in Caracas, about 1,500 miles from the U.S. border. The short operation led to Nicolás Maduro's capture and transfer to New York for trial under international law. Soon after, U.S. forces and restructured local security units stepped in on religious controls. Seals were removed, churches were allowed to operate again, and hundreds of detained believers were freed. Sunday services happened openly for the first time in years, with crowds bigger than expected. Amid the flood of news, some observers pointed to Daniel 7:25 as a noteworthy reference. It says, "And he shall speak great words against the Most High, and shall wear out the saints of the Most High, and think to change times and laws. And they shall be given into his hand until a time and times and the dividing of time." For many, this Bible verse brings to mind times when political power tries to control faith until an unexpected shift happens. Back on the ground, reports from Venezuela described an atmosphere of excitement mixed with chaos. Church bells rang alongside helicopter sounds. Candlelight lit up empty sanctuaries once more, while traces of military conflict lingered outside. This was a moment where straight news and shared emotions almost blended together. But even as joy spread among believers, arguments exploded online. Trump supporters said the action restored stolen religious freedom and showed America's role as a global protector of faith. They shared photos of open churches as proof that military moves can bring positive change. On the other side, critics called it over-the-line interference, setting a risky precedent by tying religion directly to military action. Some analysts warned that using force to free faith could trigger chain reactions, worsening conflicts in already unstable areas. In that wave of opposing views, Daniel 7:25 kept coming up, not as proof of who's right, but as a way to think about cycles of power, suppression, and release that have repeated through human history. The facts show that in just 48 hours after the event, search terms like religious freedom, Venezuela churches, and Trump intervention hit tens of millions of hits. That proves the interest goes far beyond US politics or Latin America. It's a worldwide issue now. In the middle of that info storm, we, the folks watching from screens, are in a unique spot, not right there in Caracas, but seeing every image, every comment, every clashing reaction roll in nonstop. It feels like time is compressed, everything moving faster than we can process. The move to open all churches in Venezuela has, in practical terms, brought back religious life to over 10,000 Catholic and Protestant sites. But symbolically, it raises bigger questions about the lines between power, faith, and a changing world order. And right at that crossroads, the story isn't over. Is this just a one-time action, or the start of deeper changes where things once seen as impossible are now reality? What about you? Looking at the Venezuela events, which side do you lean toward? A needed breakthrough for religious freedom, or a dangerous precedent for the world's future? An ancient prophecy echoes again. Trump's actions in Venezuela were foretold long ago in religious circles. Just as the church doors in Venezuela were closing after that first big explosion of events, another layer of information started coming out, slower, deeper, and leaving a lot of folks who follow this stuff feeling a bit uneasy. The news stories weren't just about military moves or politics anymore. They went back in time, digging up words that had been spoken years earlier. It didn't feel like just hearing the news anymore. It was more like watching an old book quietly turn its own pages. On January 5, 2026, Breitbart ran a piece titled, something like "Ancient Prophecy Links Trump to Religious Revival in Latin America." Around the same time, the Christian Post put out a long analysis called "Biblical Prophecy and Trump's Role in the Religious Struggle." These articles weren't breaking new events. They were asking, had what just happened in Venezuela been talked about before? In those pieces, the name Kim Clement came up a lot. Back in 2007, in a teaching session that was recorded and still available, he mentioned a U.S. leader who's not like the usual moral kings, but who would be used to open doors that have been shut down south of here. When that old video got played again, a lot of people watching felt like they were seeing words that had been overlooked suddenly fit perfectly. What made the match so hard to believe was the detail about the South. Back in 2007, there wasn't any real reason to single out Venezuela as some global religious hotspot. But almost 20 years later, that very country became the place where all the churches got opened up in just a few hours after a military event, exactly like the picture of long locked doors swinging wide open. That strange feeling got even stronger as church attacks kept happening at the same time in other parts of the world. On January 1, 2026, the Vondelkerk in Amsterdam, Netherlands, went up in a fierce fire, with flames reaching about 100 feet and destroying most of the 154-year-old building. Seeing those pictures next to the ones of church bells ringing in Caracas created a stark contrast that many watchers couldn't ignore. The pieces started fitting together on their own. Churches burning to the ground in one place, churches reopening in another, ruin on one side, renewal on the other. That back and forth pushed the story beyond just regular news. Religious analysts here in the US started offering explanations rooted in history. They pointed back to the early 2000s, when some pastors like Lance Wallnau called Trump a modern Cyrus, meaning a leader not from a traditional religious background, but still used to protect God's people. That idea used to seem like a far-off metaphor, until recent events brought it up over and over again. The global picture also made those old prophecies stand out more. In 2023, Europe saw over 2,444 anti-Christian hate crimes, with 62% being vandalism aimed right at churches. Just in Sudan, in December 2025, 2 historic churches were badly damaged during riots. When you put those numbers next to the Venezuela events, a lot of people started talking about a cycle picking up speed. At this point, the Bible isn't being presented as a final answer, but like an old map spread out on the table. Isaiah 45:1 gets quoted a lot in these discussions. Thus saith the Lord to his anointed, to Cyrus, whose right hand I have holden, to subdue nations before him. And I will loose the loins of kings, to open before him the 2-leaved gates, and the gates shall not be shut. For many, the image of opening double gates is hard to overlook when thinking about the churches just reopened in Venezuela. But not everyone sees these connections the same way. Secular scholars say people tend to spot patterns after something happens, and linking prophecy to current events might just be a psychological thing. To them, Trump's decisions come from geopolitical calculations, not some preset religious script. On the other side, theology researchers push back that it's not about personal motives, but historical outcomes. They argue that in the Bible, plenty of figures were used not because they were perfect, but because of their part in a bigger flow. The match isn't in tiny details, but in the overall direction of events. Between those two views, we, the ones following every picture and every analysis, are in a unique spot. We're not writing the story ourselves, but we're witnesses to how words from the past and actions in the present seem to cross paths. There are moments when that feeling makes you wonder if it's all coincidence, or if something deeper is at work. The Venezuela events keep adding fuel to these debates, as the U.S. government announced a $50 million aid package to rebuild rundown religious sites. Just days later, big services with over 100,000 people were held in Caracas, mixed with images of lingering smoke from the earlier military clashes. That contrasting picture reminded many of light breaking through chaos. Some observers compared it to the Basilica of St. Mary in Minneapolis, turning into a light show space called Luminescence back in November 2025, where modern tech retold stories of faith. Both carry a similar message. Faith doesn't fade in the dark. It often shines strongest when pushed to the edge. In that bigger picture, Isaiah 45:1 keeps coming up as a key to understanding, not to prove who's right, but to raise questions about people's roles in history's turning points. One view is political, where everything boils down to interests and strategy. The other is prophetic, where events fit into a longer timeline, beyond one term or one lifetime. And right at that crossing point, the question comes up for each of us watching. Are you seeing the Venezuela events as a string of random choices, or as a link in a story sketched out long ago? If these connections keep coming, if other doors open in places no one expects, then Trump's role in all this might not be fully revealed yet. And that's when the bigger question starts to form, leading us to the next part, where the impact of these events doesn't stop in the present, but reaches straight into the future. The future impact of Trump, revival or change in global religion. Not every warning comes with a thunderclap. Some signs show up in the form of a morning news story, scrolling across the screen, and gone before we even notice something shifting. When you read or hear those lines, do you ever wonder, what if this isn't just politics, but a turning point for faith around the world? Or are we so used to chaos that we miss the quietest signals? On January 6, 2026, Reuters put out an article with a controversial title, "Trump's Venezuela Move Sparks Global Religious Revival?" The question mark at the end doesn't soften the weight of the content. Instead, it's like an invitation for readers to step into the gray area between revival and change. Trump's action in Venezuela isn't seen as just a regional decision anymore, but it's starting to be picked apart as a catalyst that could spread beyond national borders. Early analyses focused on Latin America, but the story's flow quickly crossed the Atlantic and looped back to the U.S. itself. The shooting at Richmond Road Baptist Church in Lexington, Kentucky, in 2025, which killed 2 people, is still fresh in the minds of faith communities, like an unhealed crack in a place of worship. Less than a year later, the Mormon church fire in September 2025 took 4 lives, raising tough questions about how safe faith is in the modern world. This is where the Bible gets brought up not as comfort, but as a warning. Matthew 24-12 says, "And because iniquity shall abound, the love of many shall wax cold." When violence and hate creep into spots once thought untouchable, that verse rings out like a reminder that love growing cold can start with ignoring the smallest signs. The numbers aren't just dry stats when you line them up over time. In 2018, the U.S. saw about 50 attacks on churches that jumped to over 415 inches 2024, showing a clear upward trend that's hard to deny. Globally, in Germany alone, over 2,000 vandalism cases against religious sites were reported in 2025, turning Europe, the cradle of Christianity, into an uneasy space for faith. In that setting, Trump's move in Venezuela, just about 300 miles from the Colombian border, is seen by many observers as a dangerous or necessary precedent, depending on the viewpoint. A superpower stepping in directly to revive religion in another country opens up the chance for it to spread to Cuba or Nicaragua, where faith communities still face restrictions. The question isn't, will it spread, but how will it spread? The Bible, in Amos 3-7, states, "Surely the Lord God will do nothing, but he revealeth his secret unto his servants the prophets." As geopolitical and religious events mix, many believe those secrets aren't hidden anymore, but are showing up through real human actions in modern history. Looking to the near future, one scenario getting talked about more in religious and political forums is Trump pushing for an international religious alliance, crossing national borders and ideologies. Plans to fund a new church complex in Caracas, up to 1 million square feet, are described as a symbol of revival, but also fuel for debate. Faith migrants might flock there, turning the city into a new regional hub for belief. But history shows every renewal comes with pushback. In December 2025, Grace Cathedral in San Francisco stirred up a storm by turning its worship space into an aura light show, blending tech, music, and rituals. For supporters, it's faith adapting to the times, but for critics, it's a sign of watering down the sacred, where the line between worship and entertainment gets blurry. 2 Timothy 4-3 warned early on, "For the time will come when they will not endure sound doctrine, but after their own lusts shall they heap to themselves teachers, having itching ears." When tech enters the sanctuary, the question isn't just about form, but about the core of belief in a world craving experiences over quiet. If Trump's religious involvement expands, it could create 2 parallel paths. One is a strong revival of faith communities, where churches become spiritual strongholds amid global chaos, giving a sense of stability and purpose. The other is the risk of politicizing faith, turning religion into a power tool, leading to new conflicts under the guise of protecting the sacred. Right at that crossroads, the Bible speaks again as both warning and promise. Revelation 21-5 says, "And he that sat upon the throne said, Behold, I make all things new. And he said unto me, Write, for these words are true and faithful." The making new mentioned isn't always smooth, but often comes with sifting and testing people's faith. Trump supporters see him as a decisive leader, ready to act to protect eroding religious spaces, and in their eyes, that brings hope in an unstable world. They believe clear stances can stop faith's decline, creating a new order where spiritual values take center stage. On the other hand, Skeptical voices warn that every intervention has a cost, and history has seen faith twisted plenty of times when tied too closely to worldly power. The spread of the Venezuela model could open a new chapter, but whether it's written in the ink of revival or change is something no one dares to claim for sure. Jeremiah 6:16 reminds, "Thus saith the Lord, stand ye in the ways, and see, and ask for the old paths. Where is the good way? And walk therein, and ye shall find rest for your souls." In the whirlwind of change, the call to return to old paths sounds like a warning that not every new thing leads to peace. When you look at the big picture, from church attacks and news of religious revival to international plans, feelings can swing easily between hope and worry. Hope that faith can be an anchor for a cracked world, and worry that faith itself might get pulled into unprecedented whirlpools. If Trump's impact really spreads beyond Latin America to touch global religious structures, the final question isn't just judging a policy right or wrong. It becomes a question about humanity's role in a bigger plan, where every action can be seen as setup or test. And as history's river keeps rolling, carrying both light and shadow, we have to ask ourselves, how will Trump be remembered in this new chapter? A savior of revival, or the one who unwittingly opens an irreversible turn for global faith? Who will Trump be? A prophetic leader or a symbol of salvation? On January 5, 2026, a question came up openly in international media. Who will Trump be when it comes to prophecies? It's no longer about debating policies or power. It's a deeper question that creeps into people's minds in these chaotic times. When Venezuela just reopened thousands of churches after years of them being shut down, that question isn't abstract anymore. It feels real and haunting, like history is trying to tell us something. Just a year earlier, in March 2025, a shooting at a Catholic school in Minneapolis took the lives of kids who hadn't even grasped what faith really means yet. Walls built to protect something sacred ended up seeing blood spilled. That same year in France, church arson spread like wildfire, with 29 cases recorded in 2025, turning centuries-old sanctuaries into piles of ash. These events don't stand alone. They link together in a chain that forces folks to face the question, why is faith becoming a target? In that setting, 2024 in the United States saw 415 hostile attacks on religious sites, including 55 arsons. Those dry numbers, placed next to pictures of kids lost and churches collapsing, paint a gloomy picture of the modern world's spiritual state. Faith isn't just being challenged. It almost seems like it's on trial in the court of history. Psalm chapter 2, verse 2, rings out like an ancient accusation. The kings of the earth set themselves, and the rulers take counsel together against the Lord and against his anointed. This Bible verse isn't just religious text anymore. It's like a mirror reflecting our era, where worldly powers clash with the sacred and conflict doesn't look like old-fashioned war. Right at that crossroads, Trump's image starts getting compared to biblical figures. After the Venezuela events early in 2026, he doesn't just show up as a political decision-maker. He becomes a symbol that many see as a protector of faith. Big religious conferences in Washington, D.C. are proposed, with over 1,000 faith leaders from various countries attending, raising the feeling that the line between politics and faith is blurring a lot. Isaiah chapter 10, verse 1 comes up as another charge. Woe unto them that decree unrighteous decrees, and that write grievousness which they have prescribed, set against global decisions that directly affect religious freedom. This verse isn't encouraging anymore. It's a reminder that all power has to answer to divine justice, no matter what name it hides behind. Some folks see Trump as a leader used in a special moment, not because he's perfect personally, but for his role in history. They point out that in the Bible, many people God used weren't always upright by usual standards. To them, Venezuela is just the start of a bigger chain of events, where faith gets put back at the center of global order. But there are totally opposite voices too. They warn that turning a political figure into something divine is a dangerous path that can easily lead to losing the humble essence of faith. In their view, what's happening is just overhyped coincidence, and any effort to tie Trump to a prophetic role reflects collective fear more than divine will. Matthew chapter 7 verse 16 sounds like a cool-headed standard. Ye shall know them by their fruits. This isn't praise or condemnation. It's a straightforward measure, asking people to look at results, not just promises. The decisions coming up, what gets built or destroyed, will give the clearest answer to any leader's true role. Between those clashing views, the question still hangs in the air. If this is just politics, why does it touch the faith of millions so deeply? And if it's something beyond politics, then the world is at a turning point we haven't seen before? Daniel chapter 12, verse 4, closes with a chilling echo. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall be increased. It's as if the Bible foresaw an age full of information and arguments, where people know more than ever but struggle to tell what's truth. Will Trump just be a passing symbol of chaotic times, or a key figure in a bigger picture slowly coming into view? As the next decisions get made, not only political fates get shaped, but a whole generation's beliefs get tested. And maybe the answer isn't in what's already happened, but in what's coming. As history keeps turning pages we're not sure we're ready to read. Trump's decisions, choices that shape the future of religion and humanity. On January 6, 2026, news stories around the world all focused on one thing: what Donald Trump would do next. It wasn't just about one country anymore, but a series of choices that had everyone holding their breath. When a leader starts touching the line between religious freedom and getting involved in world affairs, things get tense right away, because every move could change the way things have always been. Just a few days earlier, on January 1, 2026, an old church in the Netherlands caught fire on New Year's night, with flames reaching dozens of feet high and lighting up the dark European sky. That image quickly brought back memories of the shooting at a church in Michigan in 2025, where a sacred place was shattered in an instant. These events aren't seen as random anymore. They're putting real pressure on every political decision coming up. In that setting, old numbers from the past start coming back to haunt the present. In 2023, the United States saw more than 485 attacks on churches and religious sites. In 2025, France faced 56 cases of desecration, turning ancient cathedrals into targets of hate. When you put these facts side by side, a chilling question comes up. If nothing is done, what will happen next? Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verse 1 rings out like a guiding thought. To everything there is a season and a time, to every purpose under the heaven. Every moment has its purpose, and the decisions coming now don't seem like coincidences. As the world enters a time of unrest, the choices of the top leader don't just affect one country's borders anymore. They spread to the beliefs of millions of people. The possibilities being weighed are getting clearer. An international alliance against religious persecution might be formed, bringing in many powerful countries. Proposals for up to $100 billion to protect churches and places of worship around the world are starting to be talked about seriously. If that happens, the global political order would shift, much like how a light show at the Basilica of St. Mary in Minneapolis once turned a sacred space into a worldwide symbol of renewed faith. But every decision comes with consequences. Getting involved more deeply could be seen as protecting religious freedom, but it might also look like the start of new conflicts. In all this, the Bible doesn't take sides to cheer or oppose. It acts as a way to understand, reminding us that power doesn't work on its own. Proverbs chapter 21, verse 1 comes up as a key turning point. The king's heart is in the hand of the Lord, as the rivers of water. He turneth it whithersoever he will. This verse doesn't praise people. It puts every decision in its proper place. No matter how great the power seems, it still flows in a direction guided by the Lord's hand, never outside the control of the Most High. When you put this Bible verse next to the choices taking shape, the warning becomes clear. If those decisions truly protect faith, they'll become tools for spiritual survival. But if they're driven by ambition or fear, the results won't stop at politics. They'll reach into the hearts and minds of all humanity. Jeremiah chapter 17, verse 5, goes on like another layer of understanding. Cursed be the man that trusteth in man, and maketh flesh his arm. These words aren't aimed at one person. They point straight to the risk of putting full trust in earthly power. This is the fragile line the world is approaching, where faith could be protected, but it could also be twisted. Some people see the upcoming decisions as signs of smart strategy, opening chances to save faith that's under attack worldwide. For them, strong action is needed in a world that's no longer neutral about religion. But there are also voices warning that any expansion of power, even under noble reasons, carries the risk of going beyond its original limits. Isaiah chapter 33 verse 22 sounds like a balancing reminder. For the Lord is our judge, the Lord is our lawgiver, the Lord is our king, he will save us. It's not any leader, but the Lord himself who's at the center of salvation. When people forget this, decisions wrapped in good intentions can turn into sources of chaos. Trump's choices in the coming time won't just be watched by the world. They'll be compared to history and the Bible. They'll shape how humanity understands religious freedom, power, and the line between protection and control. This isn't just one country's issue anymore. It's a test for the entire spiritual order of our time. And as the picture keeps unfolding for everyone watching, the question isn't which decision will be made, but where the outcomes will lead humanity. Will this be the path that carries faith through the darkness, or a turn that pushes the world into a new whirlwind where everything is tested to the limit? Will Trump be the one who pushes everything into chaos or saves humanity? On the 6th of January, 2026, as the last headlines about Venezuela spread across the world, the news rhythm suddenly slowed in an odd way. No more alarm bells or exploding images, just a question hanging there. And if you're watching this far, you probably sense that quiet moment too, where all conclusions seem held back behind a deep sigh. The international news that day all raised questions about Trump's legacy after the recent events. The words weren't as harsh as before, shifting to a more thoughtful, probing tone. When hate crime numbers against Christians in Germany more than doubled in 2025, and Israel saw over 100 religious harassment cases in 2023, the world had to look back at the big picture with more caution. Those facts don't tell their own story. They need to be put side by side to form the full picture. In 2024, over 400 vandalism cases against churches were recorded worldwide, showing that faith is on a thin edge. Right at that crossroads, Trump's actions get examined, not as ready answers, but as something that changes the path. One view is that strong interventions could pave the way for religious reconciliation, creating a common ground for hurt communities to find their voice again. In this light, uniting and protecting faith isn't about control, but stopping the widespread erosion. Light, in that sense, doesn't chase away darkness right away, but it's enough to keep people from getting lost. Alongside that, another view questions the long-term effects. Interventions, even with noble aims, could still ramp up tensions, especially in politically and religiously sensitive areas. Darkness, in this way, isn't just the absence of light, but the result of decisions beyond human control. Between those two views, the image of the light show at the Basilica of St. Mary in Minneapolis often comes up as a symbol. Bright light covers the old space, not erasing history's cracks, but making them stand out more. That mix of beauty and fragility mirrors the state of faith in this era. Matthew chapter 24 verse 14 appears like a judgment above all debates. And this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world for a witness unto all nations, and then shall the end come. This Bible verse isn't just about the mission. It sets the final order. It's not people deciding the end, but what's witnessed before all humanity. When you put this next to global actions, the meaning gets layered. Pushing religious freedom could be seen as a step toward the shared mission, but it might also accidentally speed up hidden conflicts. Light spreads, but shadows stretch in unexpected ways too. Revelation chapter 20 verse 12 expands that meaning further. And I saw the dead, small and great, stand before God, and the books were opened. The final judgment isn't based on power or fame, but on what's been seen and recorded. This makes all current judgments temporary, since the ultimate measure isn't in human hands. The debates around Trump don't stop at whether he brings chaos or salvation. They shift to a deeper question about how humanity reacts to change. When faith gets put back at the center of global talks, every choice, whether supportive or doubtful, reflects the fears and hopes that exist together. James chapter 1 verse 20 rings out like a balancing reminder. For the wrath of man worketh not the righteousness of God. This draws a clear line between passion and righteousness. Not every bold action leads to what's right, and not every slowness is indifference. At this ending point, no absolute statement is made. Trump appears as a force that stirs the already unsteady waters. That change could open a path to hope or trigger new waves no one saw coming. Both possibilities exist side by side, like light and shadow in the same frame. And as history keeps unfolding before the viewer's eyes, the question isn't about picking a side anymore, but about what we'll hear and witness next. Will it be the sign of redemption completed, or a new chapter forcing humanity to face itself in silence and reflection? Everything we've just looked back on, from Venezuela being shaken by the reopening of churches, ancient prophecies coming up again, to Trump's controversial decisions, none of it stands alone as separate pieces. It all fits together into one connected chain of events, where faith, power, and human fear show up side by side, weaving together in a time when everything seems to be speeding up. When we step back and look at the whole journey, one common thread keeps coming through. Faith doesn't go away, but it's always being tested. Churches close and then open again. Bells ring after long silence. Endless arguments go on. All of it mirrors a world feeling its way between light and darkness, just like the big picture the Bible painted long ago. Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verse 1 reminds us, "To everything there is a season, and a time to every purpose under the heaven. Every change has its own time, and nothing happens outside of God's sight." What we're hearing and seeing today might just be a small part of a much bigger plan that we can't fully understand yet. That's why the call at the end of this journey isn't about picking sides or declaring who's right or wrong. It's an invitation to stay awake spiritually, to look at ourselves, repent for the ways we've drifted from the truth, and turn back to putting our trust in the Lord instead of placing all our hope in people or earthly power. Joel chapter 2 verse 12 rings out like an urgent call. "Turn ye even to me with all your heart, and with fasting, and with weeping, and with mourning." That turning back isn't loud or showy. It starts with a humble heart that knows how to listen and pray in quiet. If you've watched all the way to these final moments, please take a second to leave a prayer in the comments below, or just share your most honest thoughts about what we've talked about. Every prayer, short or long, is like a little candle lit in these unsettled times. Don't forget to hit like, share, and subscribe to the channel so we can stay together and not miss any signs the Lord allows to be shown in the days ahead. Staying connected, following along, and thinking about these things together is one way we can strengthen each other's faith in a restless world. Finally, thank you from the bottom of my heart for sticking with me to the end. May the Lord bless you, keep you and your family safe and at peace in every situation, and guide your every step in His light. Amen.
Ali Duplo reports that's
Have you ever wondered, what if the world suddenly started counting time in days instead of years? When the oceans roar and uncover things long buried, when the sky lights up bright and then goes pitch black like it's being torn apart, when mountains shake, the ground splits open, fire crawls like a living creature, and strange sounds echo from the heavens. Time doesn't just pass anymore, it's rushing forward. Everything is happening so fast, one thing right after another, like someone is quickly turning the last pages of human history. 10 events, not separate, not scattered. They crash, flood, fall, erupt, swallow, surround. From the sea to the sky, from ice to molten lava, from heavenly light to total darkness. Science tries to name them. People try to get used to them. But there are moments when all that's left is a heavy silence before something big is about to be revealed. What frame of mind are you in while watching this? Curious, skeptical, or uneasy? If something inside you just stirred a little, stick around. And before we go any deeper, please leave a short prayer in the comments below. Not out of fear, but asking for peace for all of us, for you, and for a year that's starting out in the middle of so much chaos. Now, are you ready? We're going to dig deeper and look for the real meaning behind these 10 events. Let's get started right away with 1. The strange fishtail washed up on the beach. A familiar beach suddenly feels unfamiliar when something lies motionless on the sand, gleaming in the early morning.